today we will discuss the different influences that shape English language. English was not merely the product of the dialects brought to England by Anglo-Saxon and Jutes, the three Germanic tribes. But in the course of the first 700 years of its existence in England, it was brought into contact with at least three other languages of Celts, the Romans, and the Scandinavians. Celts were the early inhabitants in Britain. So when the Germanic tribes, Anglo-Saxon Jutes, came there with their Anglo-Frisian dialects, that get mixed and mingled with the Celtic dialects and Celtic language. So Old English language, what we call it, get influenced by various language during that period from 450 to 1066 in its course. At first it was the Celts, and then came the Romans, and finally the Scandinavians, the Viking invasion. And the Romans, the Celts, Scandinavians, all Romans were already, the Romans influence, the Latin influence were already there in the Britain. So when Anglo-Saxon Jutes came there, they faced the Celt influence as well as the Roman influence, the Romanized Celts. Okay, and after their settlements, when Viking invasion started, Scandinavian words and Scandinavian language influenced Old English language. And from each of these contexts, it shows certain effects, especially addition to its vocabulary. Over the centuries, the English language has been influenced by several other languages. British Celts. British Celts learned the language of the invaders and adapted to their way of life. During these 1000 years from 1 AD to 1000 AD, there were constant shifting of boundaries. Boundaries on the map and in the minds of the people living there. Different cultures made and clashed time after time. Spiritually, the British moved from a people worshipping Celtic pagan gods at the start of the period to a nation of Christians at its end. And this changing scenario affects the language development a lot. Now, the influence of Celtic language over Old English or Anglo-Saxon language. The British Isles were occupied by different people for at least 50,000 years. But we come to know about the spoken language, the settlement of the Celts around 3,000 years ago. Though in Britain, Celtic is still practiced. Celtic means here not the persons, not the community, not the race, but Celtic language. As English denotes English language and also English people, here Celtic denotes also English Celtic language and Celtic people. Celtic is still practiced in Wales, Scotland and Ireland. They are not considered English, but English was influenced by this language. Irish English and Scottish English are two varieties of English language influenced by the Celtic language. Just as the Celtic tribe get mixed or pushed afar by the more ferocious and powerful invaders, so also their languages were displaced and dismantled. In origin, Celtic languages are a group of related languages descended from Proto-Celtic or Common Celtic, which is a branch of Greater Indo-European language. We know about Indo-European language tree, but Celtic language is included in Greater Indo-European language family. There are 6 Celtic languages still spoken in the world today, particularly in Northwest Europe. They are divided into 2 groups, Brythonic, that is British, and in this subgroup there are Wales, Cornish and Breton. And in the Gaelic group there is Irish, Ireland, Scottish, Scotland and Manx. In this way, Celtic language is still there in Britain. The Celtic languages influence English in 3 phases. The first phase involves loans into Germanic and other languages on the continent, and means Europe continent. They first the two languages introduced with each other, Celtic and Germanic. The second one covers adoptions into English, Old English, both before and after the introduction of Christianity. When the Anglo-Saxon Jutes came in Britain, they faced this Celtic language through the Celts before and after Christianity. Before Christianity, the influence may be more prominent than after Christianity. So Celts were actually in continent, European continent. They sometimes, some of them or few of them came to Britain and settled there and developed their own community. And they are faced with the Germanic tribes. When they were in the continent, in the first page, they faced the Germanic tribes, and again coming after Britain, they again faced the Germanic tribes. So in these two phases, Celtic language influenced English. Further, in third phase, the influence of the Celtic languages after the Old English period. There even few Celtic people and few Celtic influences that we read that till now there are some places where Celtic language is still spoken in Britain. So in third phase, after Old English period, Celtic language influenced the Germanic language or next English language. There is a great deal of archaeological evidence that proves the Celtic existence in Europe and therefore its influence over Latin and Germanic language on the continent. The English word beak has its origin in Celtic back, and the word dunghill is both Celtic and Germanic. So it may be borrowed from Celtic into Germanic. In the second phase, during the interaction in Britain, the borrowings from Celtic by Latin and Germanic speakers are limited to some place names and common names. And it is in the names of the rivers, hills, places we found Celtic borrowings. Place names like Avon, Devon, Thames, York, London, Kent, etc. Others, Whiskey, Clan, Bird, etc. There is syntactical development and evolution in the later period, but the origin of such words as Dover, rock, lake, and valley had its early birth in the Celtic ground. It is not easy to dig out all the invisible Celtic influence on the English language, but we can easily sum up the roots of many English words that have their depth in Celtic soil. Now come for Latin influence. The Roman Empire ruled much of Europe for a longer time. Their political power had much to contribute to the dominance of Latin in parts of Britain and the European continent. Latin was also the language of the Roman Catholic Church. Therefore, Latin exerted a powerful influence over English and other contemporary languages. Old English was influenced by Latin in three stages. First, when the Anglo-Saxon Jutes were still on the continent. Okay, so like Celtic influence, Latin influence also works in three stages. When the Anglo-Saxon and Jutes were in continent, actually European continent, before they arrived in Britain. Then they face also with Latin language. Again, they worked as slaves in the fields, as soldiers in the army and trade under the power of Roman Empire. Why? Because this act as slave in the field and soldier in the army. But in various ways they work under the Roman Empire. So in that way they get influenced by the Celtic language. Later when the Germanic tribes settled in England, they learned few Latin words from the Romanized people of the towns. Romanized Celts. Finally, when the Roman missionaries introduced Christianity into the island in 597 AD, words related to church, religion, missionaries, Christian ideas and beliefs introduced in their language. Most of the words borrowed from Latin before 450 AD and during the Old English period are commercial, military, religious and cultural terms. Church-related words like priest, cleric, demon, nun, monk, bishop, cross, mass, angels, Eucharist, hymn, baptism, paradise, etc. and everyday words like folk, spade, school, rose, circle, paper, spider, etc. are all from Roman sources. Place names like Manchester, Winchester, Colchester, Rochester and Lancaster are of Latin origin. In Old English, the word custer, later it was palatalized to Chester. Latin was also a source of loan translations. Unicorn or one horn is translated into Old English horn, one horn. But later, modern English speakers avoid the Old English translation and return to the Latin loan and borrow unicorn, not one horn. There are many such examples. Scandinavian influence. Near the end of the Old English period, English underwent a third foreign influence, that is Scandinavian influence. People in present-day Sweden, Denmark, and Norway began to throng in different parts of Europe, leaving their homes around the 8th century. Sweden spreads eastward towards Russia, Danes went to Normandy and eastern England, whereas Norwegians shifted towards Iceland and the western part of British Isles. All their languages are referred to collaboratively as Old Norse or Scandinavian. Though they are closely related, they have some distinctive qualities of their own. These speakers settled in different parts of the British Isles and influenced different dialects of English. One noteworthy point was that the communication between the two groups were easy, as the Old English and the Scandinavian language have many basic words in common, like winter, summer, man, wife, etc. So this common feature helps them a lot. In Scandinavian loans, we find a significant shift in the meanings of words. For instance, dream means joy in Old English, but becomes vision in sleep in Middle English. So now we use the word dream in this sense, not in this sense. Plow means measure of land in Old English, but in modern English it means plow means to furrow a land. Again, we can find a meaning shift in pair, such as skill and craft. Meaning in pair, skill and craft, skin and hide, ill and sick, etc. Old English words like orphan, ire, niman are lost and replaced by Scandinavian cast, anger, and take, respectively. At first, the Danes were only attackers. They just attacked the land and loot the places. Later, when they settled down on the island and entered into the ordinary relations of life with the English, Scandinavian words began to enter in numbers into languages. Place names like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and words like dart, down, kid, leg, loan, seat, skill, skin, low, give, kindle, call, rift, brink, egg, get, give, guess, ransack, window, weak, wrong, etc. are all of Scandinavian origin. Place names ending in by such as Rugby, Derby, and Whitby are common for Scandinavian settlement. Now come the French influence with Norman conquest. French influence over Old and Middle English was conspicuous in two phases. The first phase started with the Norman conquest in 1066 and expanded till 1250, whereas the second phase stretched from 1250 to 1500. After the arrival of the Normans in 1066, French became the official language. In this period, the English language was strongly influenced by Norman French and later by Central French, two varieties of French language. The King's Court, religious communities, aristocratic estates were sources of French influence. Kings, feudal lords, all spoke in French, though they were only 2% of the population. And the common people, the great mass of the population, they spoke in English. And English was the language of ordinary trade and agriculture. In 1204, King John lost Normandy to Philip II of France, isolating the Normans from the continental lands and thus encouraging the use of English by the aristocracy. In 1362, there is a mistake. Edward III issued an act requiring the use of English. In 1733, a law was passed prohibiting the use of French and Latin in legal records. In the first phase, that is 1066, just after the Norman conquest, when the French influence was most, from 1250, fewer than 1000 words are borrowed. Words such as baron, messenger, servant, and story are borrowed at this time. In the second period, the influence of French over English was strongest. French speakers were adopting English. In the first page, French was in prominence, strangulating the English, pushing it aside. But in the second phase, English and French go side by side. So then the influence was strongest. French speakers were adapting English and adding French words to the English they are acquiring. Around 10,000 loan words were grabbed in this period in the Middle English vocabulary. The words borrowed are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and a few adverbs. Most of the words borrowed from French are related to law, learning, art, fashion, food, religion, and government. There are some words you can see: royal, state, jury, etc. Medicine, grammar, they are from French. Again, there are some hybrids where French and Latin prefixes and suffixes get attached to English word. Endearment. Here root dear is English and the prefix n is Latin and suffix ment is also Latin. English is a language that goes through constant growth and decay, and this constant shifting keeps it alive. When a language ceases to develop, it is termed as dead language. Classical Latin, which has not changed for 1,000 decades, is a dead language. But if we join the journey of the English language from Old English to Modern English, we can discern its refurbishment and reconstruction every now and then in its evolving vocabulary. Old words die out, new words are added, and existing words change their meaning. So, again, Industrial Revolution that accelerates the invention and use of new words, keeping pace with the invention and use of machineries, techniques, equipments, technology, means of transportation and trade. And new words were invented to identify the novice terms of industrial technologies like electricity, telephone, telegraph, sewing machine, horsepower, etc. So many words like bacteria, oxygen, these words came in the use of modern English from Industrial Revolution. So as well, the rise of British colonialism in 20th century also proved a very vital point for the language formation and development, particularly in vocabulary. As English language spread its wing over the continents and countries, British monarchy not only practiced its rough hands over the most part of the world, but also its language. Expansion of the British Empire as well as trade instigates the expansion of vocabulary. Colonized countries were happy to adopt the language as a result of language of the colonizers were affected by the language of the colonized. It became a two-way process. Various words like boomerang, kangaroo, court, etc. came into English vocabulary from the continents like India and Australia, Germany, Africa. From these countries, their words entered into the English vocabulary. Again, various marine words like introduced due to the exploration of colonization. See, and now finally, world war. Two world wars that ravaged the whole world also ravaged English vocabulary. And these words include some slangs and use military terms and phrases like no man's land and zigzag, ambush, radar, camouflage, etc. Okay, so these phases like colonization, world war, industrial revolution helps or formulate, develop a lot in English language. These outstanding events like Great Wall Shift, English Renaissance, international trade, industrial revolution, these factors along with the inhabitants or invaders who came in Britain like Scandinavian Vikings, Celtics, Anglo-Saxon Jutes, Normans, along with them also these incidents added to the formation of English language. Colonialism, technical development, use of jargon, media, Nowadays, too much use of media and innovative use of words with gadgets that we used. They invent new words, coin new words for their use, and they gradually include into English language. Now there is a flow chart, and here English is in the center, the king's position, and different influences circle around English and influence and nourish English language. Okay, so thank you. In our next video, we will learn about the literature.